the bit you've all been waiting for, and you're all excited about, the chemistry. So, I am not going to bore anyone with this. Essentially, the compounds within lavender are linalool acetate and some 1,8-cineol. Now, it means nothing to you other than to understand that these are alcohol type compounds that come along and they can be synthesized. I'll explain that a bit later. But I'll go through, and because I've had the opportunity to speak and I've never done it before, I'm going to put one of my heroes in. And it's this guy. Does anybody know who that is? It's not Father Christmas on holiday, and it's not Rasputin. It is, in fact, another crazy Russian. His name is Dmitry Ivanovich Mendeleev. Now, Mendeleev was known for introducing lots of different things, but one of the most fascinating things that he did is he introduced periodicity, or the periodic table. Now, he did this at a very young age, without any of the formal background. His mother had 17 children. They were extremely productive, the Russians, not as productive as some Irish. And I'll show you a picture of my dad in the lavender field later. He was one of 19 originally. So, but the Russians were very productive. Now, his mother realized that this child, somewhere later on down the chain of 17, was an absolute genius. And she got in a bus from Tobolsk in Siberia as a poor woman. She took him to St. Petersburg in Russia, and he duly met with the dean and other people, and they permitted him to study in St. Petersburg University at a very young age. Now, the reason why I pull him out is because he's known as the grandfather of chemistry. Okay? Now, the periodic table, if you imagine a chessboard with lots and lots of missing pieces, but somehow somebody manages to play chess on their own without pieces, but somehow wins and gets checkmate. That's essentially what he did with the periodic table. He got lots of elements that were found by other chemists, and he formulated, based on the atomic weight of these elements, and then he had gaps in the table where he said, this element has not been discovered, but it will be, and it will have this atomic weight and this many atoms in its outer circle, and everybody at the time thought he was crazy, but actually it turned out true. Many things like aluminium or gallium, things like that, were slotted straight into his table after being discovered later on. So he was an absolute genius, but he was like a rock star of the day, and he was a little bit crazy in his ways. He liked lots of vodka, as many Russians do. He also had a penchant for younger women, even though he was married. And he fell in love with his niece's best friend. And he declared that he was going to kill himself unless she married him. So she felt obligated because he was a national hero and she married him. But somehow I think he maybe forgot to get divorced first. So he ended up committing bigamy. Now, at the time, the Tsar heard of such a thing, and that was, you were liable to be flogged and sentenced to 10 years for bigamy. But Mendeleev was a national hero, and the Tsar said, Mendeleev may have 2 wives, but I only have one Mendeleev. So instead of sending him to prison, he made him the master of weights and volumes. And from there, he created such things as 40% volume vodka, and of which many other spirits have copied, because 40% seems to be the bit where you can sustainably drink a small amount without dying. So I think that's what the Russians were aiming for. Now, we have also, he introduced the petroleum industry and fractional distillation and stuff into their economy, which is basically what they run off these days. So he's a founding father of many things, but the periodic table is why I brought him here, so I go off on tangents. The guys who brought in compounds so that he could fit them into this kind of table in his mind, and he actually did it a lot in his sleep, believe it or not, which is crazy. But well, like this guy. So this guy's name is Henning Brand. He was a German alchemist. So before chemists such as I, or Helen, or anyone else who was involved in chemistry will tell you, alchemy was what it was all about. People were trying to discover gold. So this guy was pretty poor, but he managed to marry into a German family of a lot of wealth. And what he did to reward them with that is he boiled several tons of urine in the basement to condense it down to produce what he seen in the flask, which was a glowing flask, which he assumed initially was gold. Turns out it was phosphorus. So it glowed in the dark, and it did lots of fun things like exploded, it brought it into the air and all these kind of things. But you see, many people like Henning Brand and alchemists were the ones who initially looked at the elements, which gave him the opportunity to make the table. And then from there, much later on, in about 1919, you had Leopold Ruznik. Now, Leopold Ruznik was a Croatian-Swiss chemist, and what he did, he was fascinated with sex. But not the way all your dirty minds are thinking. He was fascinated with sex hormones and the effects of linalool and other compounds that he started creating out of lavender. So lavender was distilled, and then from there he broke down the element, the compound, into its basic form, and then rebuilt it and synthesized it. So he was the first person to synthesize. He won the Nobel Prize for it in about 1919. Consequently, not consequently, but if you see Mendeleev at the top, he didn't actually win the Nobel Prize. In my opinion, he should have won it several times over. But he was going to be awarded it in about 1906. But the guy who was the head of the committee to allow people to get the Nobel Prize actually hated his guts because he disproved some of his theories. He was a Swiss chemist, his name escapes me, but that's fine because he's the bad guy. But yeah, so Mendeleev didn't actually win it, and a year later he died in 1907. But yeah, so that's the chemistry of it. I mean, it's pretty much a bunch of misfits and miscreants chemistry that just like to do experiments and crazy things like boil urine in a basement. I'm not surprised they had many friends or not. But, so yeah, so that basically gets down to the fact that the lavender was synthesized, and when you get sprays and things like that these days, that's the synthesized lavender that was introduced by Leopold Ruznik.